Here we go. Welcome to the program as he is Caleb Calhoun and I am Dave Hooker. And we got hit with a little bit of an electrical storm last night. So I'll be real honest with you. Some interesting things going on with the tech side. Can you hear me okay, Caleb?
I can hear you perfect. How you doing, Dave?
Good. I'm in an interesting spot right now. So some of our equipment is not at full function, but here we go. A lot to get to on the program today. I hope you had a fantastic weekend, and whenever you're watching this, I hope you had a great Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to you and yours. So a lot to get to on the program today, including the Johnny Majors estate sale. How should we remember Johnny Majors? And then also on the program, we will get to a couple of different things that pertain to this season, as I know that's what you love. And that will be, man, South Carolina, who I dismissed, Texas A&M, who I think Caleb and I both dismissed at one point, are now one of the more dangerous teams in the SEC, according to 247 Sports. So we'll get to four downs about that. And maybe it's time there's a little bit of comeuppance for me because I wasn't high on South Carolina last year, but are they a program on the rise? Certainly could be the case, as ever since that insanely unpredictable day in October, the Columbia collapse, South Carolina has been off and running. So also a Missouri state law has NIL for high school players only if they attend college. I'm not sure that that's actually legal per the laws of our nation, but we'll get into that. So a lot to get to, and here we go. Let's start with four downs, Caleb Calhoun, and I want to talk about South Carolina, Texas A&M right now. And South Carolina and Texas A&M are two teams that neither one of us have been particularly high on, but I think we've changed our tune just a little bit differently on South Carolina. So here we go. Let's start with South Carolina. Four down. So first down, who is the most dangerous between the two teams overall? Is it South Carolina or is it Texas A&M?
Not even a question. It's South Carolina this year. Now, a long term, Texas A&M. I think one day Texas A&M will right this ship. But for 2023, it's South Carolina, and I don't think it's close.
Okay, I actually do think it's close. I think that most dangerous, I think South Carolina is in a better direction. I think Jimbo Fisher will eventually get fired when that buyout gets low enough. But as far as for this season, I believe that Texas A&M could be dangerous. I feel like we know what we're getting out of South Carolina this year, and that's going to be probably an 8-9 win team. I don't know if you've seen the over-under, but dangerous teams could overlook A&M because I don't think there's a terrible amount of respect for them right now. So I'm actually going to say A&M is more dangerous, maybe because I have a lower ceiling for them, Caleb, than I do South Carolina. So you'll take South Carolina. I will take Texas A&M as the more dangerous team. Okay. Is South Carolina dangerous? In what way? What would define South Carolina being dangerous this year? At the end of the day, we look back and we say South Carolina took a step in the right direction. They were dangerous in 2024. We look back at 2023. What makes them dangerous? Are they dangerous?
And for the record, before we go further, Tennessee is on this same list, guys, ahead of South Carolina and Texas A&M, considered more dangerous than those two teams. Right. My concept of dangerous would be a team that you don't think, and this is why it was a little shocking that Tennessee was on here, a team that you don't think will compete for the college football playoff, but could still be very good and could derail other teams' playoff hopes. So that's what South Carolina did to Tennessee last year. That is what they do. They face North Carolina. That's not a team they're going to be dangerous to, but they do visit Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas A&M. Sounds like what's being talked about is they're going to be dangerous against either Georgia or Tennessee on the road. I don't think they're going to be too dangerous against Tennessee. They could be dangerous against Georgia. because Georgia could be overlooking them, and Georgia does have a very young team, and that's the third game of the year. You know this, Dave, as well as I do. A quarterback disparity can be the great equalizer in football, no matter how much more talented one team is than the other. And if Spencer Rattler plays like he did at the end of last year, well, and Georgia doesn't have a quarterback to start the year, well, then all of a sudden you might see something shocking happen in that game.
Well, if you want to use they could upset somebody and they're dangerous, then I'm going to say they're definitely dangerous. They beat Tennessee last year. I don't think they will this year, but it could happen. And so since it did last year, I will say it could this year. I think they could beat Florida if that's dangerous. Dangerous to me is, and we'll talk about Tennessee being dangerous. Dangerous to me is beating Georgia and getting to the SEC championship game, and they're not going to do that. I think we would both agree. So maybe we define dangerous a little bit different, but I think we've kind of got them sort of in the same spot.
Okay, but they'll win the East before Texas A&M wins the West. I'll tell you that right now. Neither is happening, but the East is way easier. Let's start with that.
I'm not going to split a hypothetical hair with you, but I don't like where Alabama's going. And what if Jaden Daniels were to get injured? Texas A&M with a new offensive look. I don't know that I would, if I had to place it, I wouldn't bet on either team. Let me be clear. But if I had to bet on either team to win their division, I think I'd go A&M because South Carolina would just have to get a crazy fluky game against Georgia and could potentially win. But we both agree neither's going to win their division.
Yeah, neither's going to win their division. But if South Carolina gets a fluke win over Georgia, which won't happen, but if they do, they might have already won the East at that point. Look, the East is outside of Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. The whole division is garbage this year. Florida's garbage, Vanderbilt's garbage, Kentucky's garbage, and Missouri's garbage this year.
Okay, let's move on to third down. Is A&M dangerous, and what would define that, Caleb? Texas A&M being dangerous. What would define that for you?
Again, for Texas A&M, and we're defining it differently, but for me, for Texas A&M, being dangerous would have to mean beating one of the very good teams they play this year, whether it be Alabama, who they get at home, Tennessee on the road, Miami on the road, Ole Miss on the road, and LSU on the road. I mean, those are five. They'd have to win 2 or 3 of those games. You would say winning the West. I'm going to tell you this right now. They're not winning any of those games. I've said from the start, A&M's going 3-9 this year, and I'm staking my claim to that.
Well, I don't think they'll be that bad, but we'll see. So A&M dangerous to me, that would be beating LSU and or Alabama. And since I think Alabama is down, could they derail Alabama's attempt to be back to a championship level and make the college football playoff? Yes, I will say they're dangerous enough for that. So by my definition, they're dangerous. I don't think they're going to be 3-9 either, but I wouldn't be surprised by a 6-6. So either way, you're not competing for anything big time. Okay, well, the Vols beat both, and then I want to get into what makes the Vols dangerous and what defines their danger level, Will Robinson. Will the Vols beat both, one or neither? They both show up on the schedule this year.
They will beat both. They play them back-to-back with the bye in between. So they have South Carolina, then a bye, and then Texas A&M. They will beat both easily. They'll beat South Carolina because it's going into a bye and they want revenge. And they'll beat Texas A&M because Texas A&M won't be that hard to beat, and they'll be able to look ahead of Texas A&M to Alabama and still win in a blowout.
I think Tennessee beats both, and I think they do win both games handily. As far as more dangerous between the two for the Vols, I'll take A&M because I think there is a bit of an unknown there, and I think South Carolina, I think that game has been circled by Tennessee's players as a revenge game. Not that you don't get up for every game, but I think in particular you get up for the South Carolina game. So
I actually agree with you on that, even though I think South Carolina is more dangerous. For Tennessee, A&M is more dangerous, largely because Alabama's the next week. So
yeah. So okay, so Tennessee, so South Carolina is 6th on this list of most dangerous. Texas A&M is 8th, but Tennessee is 5th. So let's get to the Vols. In some ways, dangerous is it's almost a backhanded compliment. It's like you're smarter than you look, and because Caleb, yeah, I mean Tennessee's already dangerous. Dangerous to me defines making the college football playoff. Well, they were right there and number one at one point in the season last year, so I'm not exactly sure what defines this list by 247, but I mean, I think Tennessee's right up there with one of the most dangerous teams in all of college football. They could shake the apple cart. They could make the playoff. We discussed whether or not they're back. That's very debatable, but they're back in terms of competing for a playoff. So that to me is dangerous, and that's a given. So I don't think that them being fifth is any huge, prophetic statement, a profound statement. I don't think that's. I think fifth is maybe a little low. I think the Vols are more dangerous than that.
Yeah, you're right. What are we defining as dangerous? That's a good question because, okay, let's go through the list of the first 5 games. Virginia, Austin Peay, Florida, Texas, San Antonio, South Carolina, Texas A&M. Those are the first 6. Tennessee, none of those teams are going to overlook Tennessee, I don't think. Do you think any of those teams would overlook Tennessee?
No, I think you're past that point. To me, dangerous is like Tennessee was dangerous last year. They'd get overlooked.
Yeah. So then the first game where Tennessee is going to be an underdog, which we both agree is Alabama. I can tell you right now, Alabama's not overlooking Tennessee after last year. Like the way we talk about Tennessee with South Carolina, you don't think Alabama desperately wants to get back at Tennessee this year? And they're not overlooking Tennessee. They may not be good enough to still beat Tennessee, which is a bold statement, but they're not overlooking Tennessee. I'll tell you that much. So the only time you could get to dangerous is when Tennessee faces Georgia the next to last week of the year. And because that's going to be with the SEC East on the line, probably, I doubt Georgia's going to overlook that game.
Go ahead and click on that like button. It helps us open up to more people, and subscribe if you haven't done that to this point. Travis says, who's the kid hosting with Dave? As Caleb is not rocking the beard any longer, looking high and tight. I like it. Smoky Mountain Red says, I think A&M with the talent they have, if they can get it together. I'm with Smoky Mountain Red on this. I think if you did a true evaluation from top to bottom on the talent level, that A&M's better. Things break right the right way early. They could get on board. The question is, and it's a lot like Tennessee at this time last year, Tennessee's players were absolutely on board. No question about it. And we learned that, but we didn't know it at this time last year, right, Caleb? I mean, we kind of guessed it, that they might be on board. They might win 9 games, but they were on board. I talk to people all the time. I think they're on board this year, but you don't know it until you get through the season. We all thought the 99 Tennessee football team was 100% on board because they had a championship and a chance to win another. It didn't happen. So you just don't know that chemistry, and every team is different. And one thing brought up by our message board that's interesting, 2 different views of Shane Beamer. We got Shane Beamer is a clown, and then Smoky Mountain Red said, I'm not a big fan of Shane Beamer, but if he continues at this trend, I could see the Gators grabbing him. That's something you don't do oftentimes in the SEC, is grab one coach to go to another, Caleb, but we have seen it before. Tommy Tuberville would be an example. Steve Spurrier, not really an example because there was an interim where he went from the NFL first, but you have Lane Kiffin. That was almost an example. Back in the day, there was an unwritten rule where you didn't go after other SEC coaches. That's not the case anymore, despite the fact that I underrated Shane Beamer and that he has made me eat my words. I think the longer that Shane Beamer is in the SEC East, whether it's South Carolina or Tennessee or whoever, I think that's good news. South Carolina or Florida or whoever, I think that's good news for Tennessee, Caleb.
Yeah, there's a sugar high with Shane Beamer right now because
a sugar high. I love that.
He does have a really, really, really good quarterback. And like I just said, a quarterback can be the great equalizer in things. And I guess they finally decided to let Spencer Rattler play his game towards the end of the year. You could tell they switched up their game plan, which will probably help them this year. I don't know how much that helps them long term, though. Because again, when Spencer Rattler's gone, what are you going to do? And you're right. within 2 years, we're going to see a lot of these players that committed to Tennessee and then committed to South Carolina who would have committed to Tennessee, maybe hit the transfer portal. So we'll see how it goes. Shane Beamer, is Spencer Rattler Shane Beamer's Josh Dobbs? Is that a good analogy?
Well, only if.
Like, is he to Beamer what Dobbs was to Jones?
Yeah, probably. That's a pretty good comparison because I think he wins a couple of more games for Shane Beamer than Shane Beamer would have won without. And I thought Josh Dobbs kept Tennessee respectable when, in all honesty, their program from top to bottom was not respectable. Some other guys that have gone from school to school within the SEC, of course, Houston Nutt, Ole Miss, and Arkansas, and then Doug Dickey was another one. So could Shane Beamer make that sort of jump from South Carolina? Yeah, if Florida wants from South Carolina to Florida, if Florida wants him, that's the big question. I know Shane Beamer is going to look at it from a recruiting perspective, and he would make that move in a heartbeat. I don't even care if the money's the same, but certainly he would be willing to make that move if it were offered to him.
I think so too. I mean, would you not leave South Carolina for Florida? Like, who wouldn't leave South Carolina for Florida? That's a better job. It's not the best job in the world, but it's a better job in South Carolina. So I agree. I think Shane Beamer would take that move. The thing that might work in Shane Beamer's favor, and I've been saying this for a while, Clemson is on the decline. We saw that last year. Now, Dabo, to his credit, made the right staff hire again, bringing in Garrett Riley to run the offense. So maybe they're going to have another surge this year. But Dave, with conference realignment and the way things are shaking out and the awful deals in the SEC, I thought about this recently. You know, we talked about last week how Florida State can't exist in the same sphere as Florida unless they get out of the deal. Do you think Clemson can exist in the same sphere as South Carolina at this point either? I mean, this is South Carolina's advantage. They're bringing in way more money than Clemson is. And if they don't get this conference realignment thing figured out, South Carolina could really end up overtaking Clemson as the premier state school in the state, as the state school, not two state schools, but it's just South Carolina.
Right. And to get to your answer, South Carolina is a talent, upper middle class state. It's not a talent rich state. It's not LSU. It's not Louisiana. It's not Texas. It's not California. It's not Florida. But those states I just mentioned can support multiple teams. Can the state of South Carolina support two teams at the same time? I will tell you no, which leads us to, was the end of last year a fluke for South Carolina, or do they have a program on the rise? Let me begin with you, Caleb Calhoun. Which is it?
So I don't think the Spencer Rattler turnaround was a total fluke. I think those 2 wins were flukes, though. I do. I think those 2 wins were flukes. I think South Carolina benefited from Clemson not having a quarterback situation figured out, and they benefited from the whole Jeremy Banks saga with Tennessee. If Jeremy Banks doesn't decide to throw a right hook at Hendon Hooker, and if Cade Klubnik is starting at Clemson, then South Carolina finishes the year 6-6, and we're having a totally different conversation about the Gamecocks right now than we're having. And so it had a lot more to do with with the inner workings of what was going on with Tennessee and Clemson at the time than it had anything to do with what was going on in South Carolina. Even though Spencer Rattler did turn a corner and play much better in those games, and there's no denying that, they still don't win those games if those incidents don't happen.
Yes, but they did happen. So they're on the rise. I mean, I can't debate that. And I was a South Carolina hater, and I know we've got a lot of South Carolina fans that are on our channel. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't at this point. I was a South Carolina hater, man, before the Tennessee game. I thought they'd come back to earth before the Clemson game. I thought they might even play flat in the bowl game. They beat Clemson, did not play flat in the bowl game, and they're recruiting really well. I can't say they're not on the rise. I mean, they're on the rise, at least in my mind, and I would argue, Caleb, they should be in anybody's mind, because this is a football team that I thought was going to stumble along and just be an absolute disaster. And Shane Beamer might even have gotten, based off what I was told, might even have gotten fired at the end of last year before the Tennessee game. but definitely was going to be on the hot seat headed into this year. He's not. So by definition of both recruiting and his job security, they're on the rise. I don't see how we could argue that.
You're right. So could two things be true? And I'm trying to think of another program that's like this. Has there ever been a fluke game put a program on the rise? And I mean, actually, yes, there has. What am I saying? 2001 Tennessee LSU put LSU on the rise because of Nick Saban. That's the flukest game of all time. And it made Nick Saban. I'm not saying Shane Beamer is going to be Nick Saban. I'm not saying that. I am saying, though, that there are instances where fluke games can change the trajectory of a program. And it looks like Tennessee and Clemson might have done that for South Carolina in back-to-back weeks. There's no way they get this recruiting class that they're getting right now if those two games don't happen.
SC Scout guy said there was absolutely zero chance he was fired last year. I agree with that. What I was told before the Tennessee South Carolina game, SC Scout guys, who to kind of clarify a little bit, I was told that he was going to have to make pretty significant changes on his staff, which to me is a step away from getting fired. So I didn't think he was going to get fired at the end of last year. The question I have for South Carolina is when I talk to people in coaching circles, they don't think a lot of that coaching staff. So Shane Beamer might end up being the next best thing since his dad, Frank Beamer, who was a legendary coach, and I got great, mad respect for him. But if he doesn't have a great staff around him, that's going to be a problem. So defining a successful season for South Carolina, I don't think is the college football playoff. That is going to be, by the way, anybody that wins 9 or 10 games the year before, barring something insane happening, you should absolutely expect your team to be in the college football playoff once it's 12. And when it's 12 teams, don't give me that, oh, well, we got another rebuilding year. I don't care. It doesn't matter. You should expect your team to be in the 12. So if there were 12, it's easy to define for me. South Carolina has a successful season if they make the college football playoff. If they don't, then they didn't have a step in the right direction type of season. However, we're not there yet. This is 4 teams, so you've got to be one of the best 4 teams in the country. I don't think South Carolina's ready for that. I think a successful season and continuing to go in the right direction is a little bit tough to define. I think it is showing that you have Spencer Rattler on the correct path now, because you didn't for a good bit of the year last year. But if you're able to do that now, Caleb, then if that offense is anywhere close to the top of offenses we're seeing at Tennessee, Southern California, TCU, I mean, if they're anywhere in that ballpark, that to me defines success. Now, as far as the schedule, what would wins define? How many wins would define a successful season? Because I think we can both agree they're not ready for the playoff jump unless they surprise us like Tennessee did last year.
Well, I was just going through their schedule. In the same way I talked about Tennessee, I got to talk about South Carolina in terms of the schedule. Look, Dave, this is crazy. 11-1 is on the table. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's on the table because, okay, let's go through their schedule. Neutral site game versus North Carolina to start the year. North Carolina was really underwhelming last year. They could win that game. I think that might be a toss-up because Drake May's so good. And I don't know how you feel. I think Drake May's a better NFL prospect than Caleb Williams in 2 years. But
I think Dre May's a John Elway type of prospect, and you won't hear me throw that around.
There you go. So, yeah, I mean, I think North Carolina could win that game. But, okay, South Carolina could win that game too. So if South Carolina pulls it out, then they get Furman. Okay, they get at Georgia. We assume loss. But then they play Mississippi State at home. They visit Tennessee. I mean, they did beat Tennessee last year. We both think Tennessee is going to win this year, but they did beat them last year. So you can't just write off South Carolina if you're coming from South Carolina's perspective. Then you got Florida at home. Hey, I think South Carolina beats Florida at home, don't you?
Yes, I do. So, for instance, we know SC Scout guy is a South Carolina fan, so he says winning 8 games with a chance to win 9, they're still building. I think nowadays with the transfer, SC Scout guy, I think you're setting your bar a little bit low. I think 9 defines whether or not this season is a success for South Carolina. Hoghead says 9-3 or better would be a good step for SC.
Who do they lose to outside of Georgia, Tennessee, and Clemson?
No, I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out. SC Scott guy. I think you got your bar a little bit low. I mean,
Clemson at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think that 9 wins. If they just win 8, I think that would be a disappointment in the wrong direction. And in a lot of ways, it would set South Carolina back for perhaps years because they just re-up that contract with Shane Beamer. Don't forget some of those dreaded contracts. I mean, Jerry Green had one season when they got bounced by North Carolina at Tennessee where he got a new contract after, and it was like, oh, darn it. We didn't really want to give this to him, but now we're kind of stuck because he won. We've seen that happen before. No offense, SC Scout guy, but I think that's where South Carolina is going to be in a couple of years. But again, I got nothing.
First of a successful season.
Yeah, I mean, you have one successful season and then oopsie. All right, so how many wins would you think would be successful? Caleb Calhoun will tell us. It's brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Save thousands or tens of thousands of dollars thanks to the best service, the best prices in the biz. That's AndyMasonRealEstate.com. You'll love him. I sure do. He's fantastic. He's my realtor getting ready to make a move, and he's the first guy I will call. You have got to check out AndyMasonRealEstate.com, and you'll be so happy with the process. Over 40 years of experience in that office, so it's pretty phenomenal. 2 minutes, then coming back, we're going to get into some Johnny Majors talk because his estate went up for sale over the weekend. I'm going to tell you what I think about Johnny Majors. Would he have won a national title had he not been ousted at the University of Tennessee? We'll discuss. Stay tuned. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker.
And Craving Wings South North Shore location, where we've heard people say that you can get the best wings in East Tennessee. Pero ¿quién es este? El número 87, Jacob Warren.
I'll just do 6 of my sauce 87, please.
Imposible, señorita. Dale 6 más. Look at these wings. Perfectas, deliciosas, fantásticas.
Man, I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds awesome. How do you say fresh, never frozen in Spanish?
Frescas, nunca congeladas. Make your way to Craving Wings and get you 6 más.
What was funny about Cadis, we were a full continuum of care at that time. We had detox, we had inpatient, we had outpatient. So we were doing a lot of the things that we do now. But now we just do them so much better. It's really a simple program, but we're complicated people. I am what I am, and now I got to do something about it.
You can take your life back. Call Cadis today.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Our family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Yes, I welcome you back. Because, Caleb, you need to say something profound because I'm having interesting issues with my magic machine. So will you say something smart right now? And if you just say something smart, and I'm going to be mad at you because that's what John Adams used to always do. I'd say something intriguing. He would
No,
say,
I'm going to address Travis saying I look like I'm 12 because, Travis, just so you know, I turned 35 this week.
Oh, this week?
I turned 35 on Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
So I do love the fact, when I was 16, I hated when I was told, like, you look like you're 8. But now that I'm turning 35, I love being told I look so much younger.
Yeah, absolutely. I got that like up until like 5 years ago, and then it just stopped. Like all of a sudden stopped, like at 45. So I just turned 49. And so I asked somebody over the weekend, I said, we were out and about, and I said, how old do you think I look? And she flat out looked at me and said, 60.
To be fair, how old was she?
She was like 24. She was a server at a restaurant.
Okay, she should have gotten the age right, though. She was 24. Like, if like a 12-year-old...
You said she was joking, but then it was too late. The dagger was in.
Yeah, she wasn't joking.
I mean, once you say that, you can pull the dagger out, but it still hurts. I think I got my machine working. Peter Griffin, bring us back.
You're listening to The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
The internet is full of pictures of each and every one of you.
Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free.
Is there nothing you people can't do?
Also available on OffTheHookSports.com.
Caleb, you've gotten to know me. Would you consider me objective?
Very objective. Dave, you are the most objective person I know.
Thank you. Damn 60-year-old. Leaping objective 60-year-old is what the hell I am.
You know what's funny is I think one of the funny things about objective, and I know that people say whether you shouldn't be a fan of somebody because you got to be objective. I disagree with that. As I've gotten older, I think it doesn't matter whether or not you're a fan. You can still be fully objective whether or not you root for a team. I'm a Titans fan. I'm very objective about the Titans, believe me. And I think you're the same way with the Cowboys.
No, I'm a jackass with the Cowboys. I will throw stuff at the TV. I'm not objective.
No, but you're objective in the sense that you're very aware of whether or not they're going to suck this year.
Yes. Well, that's every year since 1995 or 96 because they won it in 95. So 96, I thought, actually, I knew with Barry Switzer they weren't going to keep it rolling. But anyway, okay. Yeah. Okay, so I do consider myself objective, and I will tell everybody on this message board because I consider you like family and part of the group. When we left Peyton Manning's last game in the Orange Bowl at the 1998 Orange Bowl against Nebraska, I took off my Tennessee shirt, and I told my wife, I said, I'm not going to be a Tennessee fan anymore. I'm still going to appreciate it, and I love college football. And I'm going to love the SEC more than anything in the world, but I don't think I can do this. My wife looked at me because I was the guy that threw stuff at the TV when Tennessee lost. And my wife looked at me, and happy Mother's Day to the best mom in the world yesterday. But my wife looked at me and she said, she never curses. Bull bleep. She was like, you're not going to be able to put it down. And I did. And the other reason I put it down is because it's just like that 2001 LSU game. I was really mad about that game because I was going to go to LA. I was going to go to LA, the SEC championship game. Now, I got mad about that. It probably affected my reporting and question asking after. I'm just going to be real honest with you. So I put down my objectivity. Is it better when Tennessee does better for my business and what Caleb and I do? Absolutely. But I try to put that down. That being said, I go strict crazy fanboy off one person at the University of Tennessee and with history of the University of Tennessee. And the other guy that I might, if he was still alive, would be Reggie White. But the one guy I kind of went fanboy over, and we developed a relationship, which was really cool. We were going to do the Johnny Major show, and I was his co-host, and we did a pilot. And as it turns out, the person who was putting it all together and basically in charge of selling it could not get it sold because he had a health issue that cropped up right in the middle of it. So we had the stations lined up and everything. But I'll go ahead and tell you from personal experience, the advertisers are the most important. So we thank all of our advertisers. By the way, portions of the program brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. City Heat and Air, integrity matters. 50 years, they're awesome. And they will take care of your unit with integrity. Integrity matters. Okay. So I go straight fanboy on Johnny Majors. I grew up at that time. You've got to think. I was born in 1974. So my first memories of football were around 80. I mean, one of my first memories, it was the catch that Dwight Clark reeled in the NFL. Some of my first memories were the 9-6 Alabama game where Tennessee had a kick block. So those were my memories. And he was the coach for so long. It wasn't like a revolving door at all. And then it got to the point where I covered people, and I'm not trying to say they were peers. Like I knew as much football as a Philip Fulmer, or I could throw the ball as well as a Peyton Manning. But when I covered them, they were more peers. By the way, Rebecca says, enjoy that baby face, Caleb. My husband has one of those and still looks 15 at 53. He barely shaves. There we go. I shave all the time. And just my face. So, but I went fanboy over Johnny Majors. And he comes to me, and he pulls me aside. He's like, hey, so you need to, Dave, you got to help me. A tendency to go on a little long. And you just nudge me if I go on a little long in this pilot that we did. So when I see his estate going up for sale, it's kind of a reminder that we all get old. And it's a reminder of how successful he was. And I don't think some of our younger listeners, like Rebecca, I think I can barely see her picture, and I think she's 28. But he was not just a coach that had Tennessee knocking on the door for a national title. He was a guy who went to Pitt and won a national title. Created a Heisman Trophy winner at Pitt, Tony Dorsett, which later changed to Tony Dorsett, much like Theismann to Theismann. So Joe Theismann could hopefully win the Heisman. So I don't know why it's changed to Dorsett, though. But anyway, so he had an incredible career at Tennessee. He was one of the best players of his generation. How good was he in the 50s, Caleb? Where would he rank among the best players in that group? 2, 3, 4?
Among the best players in the 50s?
Yes.
Specifically the 50s, he might be number one. I mean, he might be above, in terms of college, you got Doug Atkins, Hank Larcella, who should have won the Heisman also, by the way, in 1951. That's it. It's Johnny Majors, Doug Atkins, Hank Larcella. That's it. And Johnny Majors probably, I would say, was number one as a college football player. Doug Atkins, NFL, totally different story. But yeah, Johnny Majors was the best player in college of those three.
Did I ever tell you about the time that Doug Atkins, before NFL games, used to take his .22 and shoot birds out of the rafters of Comiskey Park before games?
You did not tell me that. That's incredible.
Not insane.
That's insane. That's pretty
about it. You talk about an interview that takes a long time to edit. That man cursed more than anybody I know. I don't know what we're going to do when we have Al Wilson on the Celebrate 98 series. You need to be sure like and subscribe to that. That's going to be, I'm going to have to buy Caleb a special birthday present to edit some of that out, but that's fine. All right. So know this, that I'm strict fanboy when it comes to Johnny Majors. Love him. He was always super nice to me. And man, just great. Okay. So he's the only guy that I've ever covered that I called coach, because these guys ain't my coach. I don't call, really the only sports term I use is commissioner. If you're the commissioner of the SEC, I will say commissioner. Although I referred to Roy Kramer as just Roy one time, and Jimmy Holmes was not happy with that. So he's the one guy I call coach. So I want to ask you this question. Would he have won? His estate's on sale now. Would he have won a national championship at Tennessee? Providing a backdrop for those younger ones that don't know. Did Philip Fulmer go after his job while Johnny Majors was having a heart attack? Well, as Johnny Majors goes, well, Dave, let me tell you something. They're working on my front, and bleepity bleep was stabbing a knife in my back. And so, yes, he thinks so. But I don't think it's quite that simple. So let me ask you, his estate's on sale. Would Johnny Majors have won a national title at Tennessee had he not been replaced by Philip Fulmer, who overtly, and I have no problem with ambition, I don't hold it against him, went after his job. He made like 100 phone calls to the president's office over the course of 2 weeks. Caleb, we work together all the time. I don't call you 100 times in 2 weeks.
No, you do not.
You don't even get that many emails. I mean, all of our contacts are less than 100 a week. So clearly he was out to get the job. Would he have won a national title at Tennessee if not for the change?
So this is really hard to say because, like,
it's one of the hardest questions of my career, to be real honest with you.
Because, okay, like, let's take the national title Tennessee won in 98. Fulmer as a program runner is not like, to me, national title caliber as head coach. It's just he had the right staff and all the talent at the right time in 98.
Got breaks,
yes. So the question with Majors becomes, okay, does Majors what led to Tennessee's 98 national title? Fulmer getting the recruiting heist of the century in Peyton Manning, which in turn led to a lot of high-profile athletes wanting to commit to Tennessee afterward because Peyton Manning was there. And the truth of the matter is that was because of David Cutcliffe. If Fulmer's Johnny Majors' offensive coordinator, does Tennessee really land Peyton Manning in 1994, Dave? Because we know that he committed to David Cutcliffe, not Philip Fulmer. That's a pretty well.
But if he gets another Heath Schuler, they do something different. I see where you're going, and this is the conversation I want to have. I love it. And I love these conversations, and I hope you guys do too in the message board. So,
and the other question is, okay, look, let's talk about that. Those the teams that Fulmer was offensive coordinator for in 89 and 90. I mean, you talk about the only teams that the late 90s teams that could compete with the late 90s teams in terms of talent was that 89 and 90 offense. Those offenses were loaded with talent. You know that, Dave, more than I do. And
but don't forget 91 and 92. Those Notre Dame matchups, that was the most amazing collection of talent I've ever seen.
89 to 92, that little run right there, that 4-year run. The defense wasn't on par with the late 90s defense, I don't think, but the offense definitely may have been better weapon-wise than
it was.
And so Fulmer had an arsenal of weapons at his hand. So what the question I'm asking is, if Fulmer had stayed along as offensive coordinator, by the way, he wouldn't have. He would have taken a head coaching job somewhere else. Okay, let's just put that out there. But say he does stay at Tennessee as offensive coordinator.
I don't think he would have actually.
Okay, you're right. I don't think he would have.
I think he would have waited 5-6 years for Johnny Majors to eventually retire because he was so loyal or he would have hated Majors. But that sidetracks us. Go ahead. So does he win a championship? Continue in that path because
I don't think Fulmer is as good of an offensive coordinator as David Cutcliffe, and that's where I was going with that. And I don't think Fulmer could tailor his offense, going from tailoring it to Heath Schuler to a Peyton Manning to a team. I mean, I don't think he could do what David Cutcliffe could do as an offensive coordinator. I'm just going to say it. I think Fulmer actually, as an OC, underachieved with the talent he had in 89 and 90. There, I'm going to say it. I think he underachieved with the talent he had in 89 and 90.
He would certainly argue with that, as he and I have had this discussion. But
so do you agree with me on that?
No, he thinks he was an excellent offense coordinator, and he doesn't like that's left off his resume as a benchmark. But that's another
9-6 against Alabama in 1990.
I know. I didn't say that was my opinion, Caleb. Here's my thing with Majors. I think, unfortunately, that the relationships with the boosters got too sour. I think that part of that was ego, and I think part of that was alcohol related. So it breaks my heart to say this, but if he hangs around at Tennessee till 96, 97, as Travis points out, had 5 years left, which, is what I was thinking. Best years were behind him. I'm afraid that's the case. And I know another coach that won a national title much more recently that I think alcohol got in the way and it affects you in recruiting. There are a lot of grandmas that they smell that on your breath, even if you just had a pop on the plane going to their place, and that's bad. I know of a coach that won a national championship recently that was known to show up at a prospect's house partially intoxicated and was asked to leave.
Why do I feel like I know the coach you're talking about?
Yeah, don't say it. So, all right. So I think that would have been a factor. And back then, you didn't get that addressed. You just rolled with it. And it was just a man being a man. Like, Paul Bear Bryant. He used to get really intoxicated with the media when they would have the Skyriders tour. So instead of the the SEC media days, they would all hop on a plane and fly from campus to campus, and they'd have pops with Paul Bear Bryant afterwards and pick his brain. And he would go through 4 or 5 whiskeys. So that's just the way things were in the early 90s and before. Fortunately, I think that our society has looked at that, especially kids my age, and they're like, I don't think I want to drink alcohol. I'm like, cool. So I don't think he would have. And it really, really breaks my heart to say that. But that still being said, he absolutely should be beloved because he got Tennessee to a spot that they could win a championship. And he's one of their best players of all time. And don't forget his brother, for those young ones out there that don't know, his brother was an assistant on the staff and killed in a train wreck. So, he's got he had a lot of emotional ties, and the majors had a lot of emotional ties. So to just discount them because he didn't win a national title, I think would be unfair and short-sighted. But do I think he would have won a national title? The only way he wins a national title, Fulmer took over in 92. The only way he wins a national title if that next year, 93, he strikes gold. After that, I think it would have started to erode.
And that 93 team may have been good enough to do it, to be fair.
Yes.
That 93 team was loaded with talent.
I think he was loading up for one last run. I think it's like, I know you gamble in sports. I like to throw dice. So whether I'm up or down at the end of a casino trip, I'll make one last run and I'll have however many dollars. And this is it. And I'm going to play for an hour unless I'm doing really good or I lose really fast. And that's it. That's my last run. I think he was loaded up for his last run in 93, and that did get taken away from him.
It's like when those 08 Celtics got together. They were loading up for one championship run. They were all towards the end of their careers, and they knew this was their chance. I want to say this in defense of John. I want to say this one thing in defense of Philip Fulmer in things in what got taken away from Johnny Majors. I want to be fair here from the other side to give the perspective. I know some people in Knoxville. I didn't live there long, but I remember talking to people just as a college kid, and I've heard a lot of rumors. They take it what you want, but I've heard a lot of rumors that Fulmer was really looking at a lot of offers after that 89 and 90 years when Tennessee was back-to-back SEC champions. And you can imagine he was a hot commodity as a head coach at that point, as a prospect, because when he becomes offensive coordinator, that's when Tennessee turns it around from 5-6 to back-to-back SEC titles. So you can imagine the type of offers he's probably getting from other schools. I had heard a lot of rumors that Johnny Majors asked Fulmer to stay along and said, this will be my last contract. And then 1992 comes around, and you and I know the story. Big Arch Caravan comes in 92, and what is he doing? Railing against the administration for not extending his contract and complaining about the fact that they wouldn't extend his contract after he had reportedly told a lot of the staff that this was his last contract. So we have to be fair to Fulmer on that side too. And I mean, I did see a comment that said there's a rumor that Fulmer sabotaged those 3 games when he lost as offensive coordinator when Majors came back in 92, when they lost to Arkansas, South Carolina, and Alabama. Guys, go back and watch those games. Fulmer didn't sabotage that. Fulmer's not the reason that Tennessee allowed Arkansas to score a touchdown, recover an onside kick, and then kick a game-winning field goal. That had nothing to do. Fulmer was not doing anything during that whole time. He was the offensive coordinator. He couldn't have done anything to cause that. So I just want to be fair to Fulmer on that front. I don't think he was purposely trying to lose games for Tennessee to get the head coaching job when Johnny Majors came back at all.
No. I mean, listen, Philip Fulmer likes Philip Fulmer number 1. Most of us do. And he likes the University of Tennessee number 2. But he would never, ever sabotage a game. Just like I don't think Tennessee's defensive players sabotaged a game because the Jeremy Banks situation. I just don't think that happens. I don't think people do that. I think people have too much pride to get to that point. Elias brings up a really good point. Maybe Brandon Stewart still ends up in Knoxville, so he has a Heath Schuler type of career. It's not a Manning, but that's a winnable one in terms of having a guy that could potentially lead you to a championship. And for those that don't know, Shadow Wolf points out Majors got sick in a hospital and Fulmer took over. Yeah. So what happened? Like a series of things had to happen. I don't want to turn this into a history lesson, but he basically had and I've talked to Mike Strange about this, who's a longtime Knoxville News Sentinel writer. Like 8 things all had to happen for Majors to lose that job. One of them, he made a bunch of boosters mad. There was the contract issue, Caleb, that you mentioned. There was the heart attack. There was the fact that they did so well when he was in the hospital. There was the fact that he rushed back. If he hadn't rushed back, the job would have still been his. If he'd just taken the year off, I've been told, you may lose Fulmer in that regard. There were like 8 things that have to fall into place. So it's a little bit of a heartbreaking thing. I know I'm probably going back a little bit before some of y'all's time, but seeing the state sale kind of hit me a little bit hard. And, it's, listen, there's some things I would like to have the money to bid on, but when a Pitt Panthers liquor decanter is going for $700, I'm going to have to take a hard pass on that.
Yeah, and that's also a little, given what we know about Johnny Major's troubles, it's a little disturbing to buy that. But Dave, my question
it was a different world. I can remember getting whiskey glasses for Christmas presents from companies.
I get my dad whiskey glasses every now and then, but
it's your family. I got it from my employer.
Well, Dave, have you ever seen? There's an old news clipping, and I think it's in Tennessee. It's an old local news story on. It's hilarious. It was making the rounds on TikTok about 2 months ago, where they were talking about when a lot of states didn't have anti-drunk driving laws until the 70s or 80s. There was just nothing to address it. So states started addressing it in the 70s. And I think it's a rural town in Tennessee. And you have these guys being like, pretty soon we're going to be a communist country. You can't open a cold beer when you're right before you're about to drive.
Oh yeah, one for the road. I mean, that was just a common thing. I can remember my dad having one between his legs because we didn't have cup holders back in the day. I mean, that was no big deal. And I will just say, I'll share this story with you because I know that this is a fact because I've got a family member that worked there, that Major showed up to one public event in a car dealership, and he was very moody when he got in and went in the back, had a couple pops, came out, and he was like Superman with the crowd and engaging with this car dealership and these boosters and everything. But when he left, he took his car that was given to him by the company parking lot, the dealership, and he hit one car that was parked so hard that it turned into like accordions, and 8 cars got actually hit because one car kept hitting another and another and another. So including his car, there were like almost double digit 10 cars involved in an accident that he created. Before we get to something stupid that we left out last week, and I'm mad at Caleb and I'm mad at me. Hoghead says, how do you guys rate Fulmer's coaching performance with the 93 team? Caleb?
Well,
before we get to our stupid comment.
I actually think he did a pretty good job with the 93 team. The Penn State game, let's not forget that Citrus Bowl was the one blowout loss, but that was where everybody knew Heath Schuler was going to the NFL. And so it was kind of the distraction of his last bowl game. And so that was an issue. Their one actual loss that year was at Florida. And I think that was Faxgate year, wasn't it? Wasn't that where where Ron Zook got a hold of Tennessee's playbook right before the game? And Tennessee still almost won that game. So, I mean, that's you got to give Fulmer some credit for that one. So I think, again, maybe Fulmer should have been a little bit more secure in his documents and his documentation. But yes, that was I forget, how does the story go, Dave? An assistant coach for Tennessee faxed the playbook to Ron Zook and the offensive game plan.
Yeah, a little before my time, but basically Tennessee's playbook was sent to Gainesville via fax.
Yes. So
and I don't know how in the world your career continues at that point. And
no, I agree.
I mean, that to me is every bit as bad as what I was talking about that Alabama baseball coach gambling on his own team. As a matter of fact, that's worse.
Oh, it's worse. It's what Dave Clawson had the same issue a few years ago. Remember when Dave Clawson, apparently an assistant, I believe, was probably on Petrino's payroll. It sounds like Petrino was hiring an assistant for Dave Clawson to send him Dave Clawson's playbooks at Wake Forest.
Well, no, a lot of people think so. Zook was opening at a position at Florida, which is why he did it, if I remember correctly. But a similar situation happened with Doug Dickey, where he went to Florida right after. A lot of people wondered if he threw the last game. Portions of the program brought to you by Craft Treats. Craft Treats, use the promo code Off the Hook. The promo code Off the Hook, get 20% off the chill pills that will help your pet overcome anxiety, arthritis, digestive issues. That is Craft Treats. CraftTreats.com. Use the promo code Off the Hook. Again, promo code Off the Hook, get 20% off. They got non-CBD treats as well that are simply awesome. So check them out. Caleb and I absolutely dropped the ball last week. Chide us if you must. Man, what the H?
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
Talked about breakout performances last week, and I read everything on the message board, guys, so you know. So not just now, but on our Celebrate 98 series, on our ball reports with Jacob Warren and Cooper Mays, and I reply to all of them. So, and you guys give me a great topic ideas. How in the world did we talk about biggest breakout performances and not Tony Robinson? Auburn, 85.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. How did we forget? Well, okay, but because to me, that's not a breakout performance because Tony Robinson was the starter in 1984, and he was considered a Heisman candidate going into 1985. So again, you can't call that a breakout performance.
Okay, it wouldn't be a breakout moment in today's worldwide internet, but it was then. People in UCLA, people in LA and Wyoming and South Florida didn't know who he was, but they knew who he was when they got that Sports Illustrated and he was on the front. So to me, that is a breakout performance. Maybe I'm twisting it a little bit. And I didn't know he was a huge Heisman candidate headed into that year, but you beat Auburn, who was the number one team at the nation, and you're on the front of Sports Illustrated. I mean, I knew who Steph Curry was before he won his first championship, but to me, it was a breakout moment at some point. I'm sure he had a big game in that first championship in the playoffs to be able to overcome a deficit or put a team away. That, to me, defines a breakout performance, and I think we at least should have mentioned that last week.
Okay, I could get with that. Dave, look, I'm so young that my entire history, my track record of covering college football and following recruiting following college football dates back to the late 90s, but following it from like a recruit from when he signs to his graduation is right around the time Rivals started in 2002. So my question is, back in the day when high profile recruits signed, was it different than now? Where did they just fly under the radar and you forgot about them until they started playing their junior year? And then from the perspective.
Yes, and you go back into the 70s, freshmen weren't eligible. So Tony Robinson was eligible. I'll give you an idea of how backwards it was. I know a reporter for the Knoxville News Sentinel, and he'd get calls because, you know, you just had a phone. You didn't have a cell phone. But in the 80s, he'd get calls and he'd go, hey, that guy they're recruiting, his name's Bob Jones. You wrote about him. Is he black or white? And the reason they would ask is because it was a stereotype that a black guy was a runner and the white guy was a pocket passer. So some people had preferences over both. Nowadays, we know that's just stupid. And what happens is stacking very, very early in a player's development will put an African American. It doesn't happen as much anymore, but they would take them away from the thinking positions, such as baseball. In baseball, it would be pitcher, catcher. In football, it would be quarterback. And so that sort of stuff happened forever. So a lot of people didn't want a black quarterback because it was a racist time. They didn't think he was smart enough, which we now know is incredibly stupid. So But to answer your question, when he came in, I don't know that anybody was very ballyhooed as a recruit. I mean, this is before my time too. I know you think I'm like 60 years old, like that waitress, but this is before my time too. But when he came in, it was pretty obvious that he had a certain flash. And after that Auburn game, it was like, whoa, this guy could win a Heisman. So what I was told by many people, and I believe, is that when he suffered the leg injury after the Auburn win later that season, that's when he turned to drugs. And for those that don't know, drugs derailed his career. Tony Robinson went on and played as a replacement player through a moonshot for the Washington Redskins. And it was a touchdown. They beat the Dallas Cowboys, who had almost all of their complete roster, not replacement players. And then the strike was over, partly because of that game. The Replacements by Keanu Reeves is loosely based off that, believe it or not. And so he had to go straight back to prison. He was literally on work release, where he would show up, practice, show up for games, and then go right back to prison. And then he watched the Redskins that year win the Super Bowl in a prison cell. So we all make mistakes, but I do believe that the injury put him in a state of depression. And I don't think we understood substance abuse like we do now. I'm not making excuses for him.
Or depression. We didn't understand depression during that time either. The way we do
absolutely. Now. I don't know that we understood depression 5 years ago, but you're right. Okay, what would he have been in today's college football, today's NFL?
Oh my gosh, Tony Robinson in today's NFL, with the way that they finally been able to tailor game plans around athletic quarterbacks. Now, let me be, you're right. This isn't a black-white thing. This is an athletic versus non-athletic quarterbacks thing. Sometimes back in the day, athletic quarterbacks were a lot of times, they almost got a raw deal in this sense. Because they were athletic, no coach is worried about developing them into pocket passers. So then they would get to the NFL and they weren't ready because they hadn't been developed as pocket passers since middle school, the way the pocket passing quarterbacks had. Does that make sense to a degree?
Right. The strongest example on your side is Randall Cunningham. So that coaching staff, Buddy Ryan, they said, they're like, they didn't run an offense. I mean, they told Randall Cunningham, they said, make 4 or 5 plays a game with your athleticism. And the defense, which was phenomenal, one of the 2 best I've seen with the 85 Bears, will win it. You just make 4 or 5 plays. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about reads and all that junk. So they never tried to develop him. Whereas nowadays you have like Lamar Jackson. So you based it around a running attack for the first 2 or 3 years to take advantage of that ability. And now he's a pretty good thrower. I think Tony Robinson, now they never did that with Mike Vick. They tried to make him a thrower from the get. I think Tony Robinson would be better than Mike Vick, would be better than Lamar Jackson, because he was a good thrower in 85. So if Tony Robinson had just finished his career, no drug issues, you can even have the injury, the knee injury, but with today's modern medicine, he's the number 1 pick in the draft. Sorry, Bryce Young. I believe that 150,000%, and you would never be able to talk me out of it. Tony was shorter, as pointed out on the message board, but everybody was shorter. Our society has grown. 6'2", 6'3" back then was now the 6'5".
Yeah, 6'5". I mean, 6'4", 6'5" wasn't a requirement for quarterback back then. And I mean, receivers back then, heck, Jerry Rice considered the best receiver of all time to you, not to me. I think he was a system receiver, but only 6 feet. And so, I mean, yeah, it's obviously a little bit different times. I could see that with Tony Robinson. See, I can't say much because I didn't watch Tony Robinson play. But I think of a guy like a Heath Schuler. I think Heath Schuler may have been sabotaged in this way. Heath Schuler, you know this, Dave, whole career was a running quarterback. He was a great thrower who was also mobile. So I'm sure from his middle school days, he was taught to use his legs before going through his read. And even Cutcliffe probably asked him to use his legs before going through his read because that's what he was good at. Well, in the NFL, you're asked to go through your reads first and then use your legs if you have to. That's a rough transition. That was the thing for the NFL from the beginning of time until about 5 years ago. So, it didn't just hurt. I think Heath Schuler would have been a heck of an NFL quarterback in today's game. Heck, Archie Manning. Could you imagine Archie Manning with the NFL today, the way they protect quarterbacks?
I mean, Archie Manning, if he's drafted by the Steelers, wins 4 Super Bowls, just like Terry Bradshaw, and Terry Bradshaw is not on TV right now.
Well, yeah, and the Steelers were the one team, the one NFL franchise that were able to take a quarterback that couldn't read a defense and develop him. Because Terry Bradshaw, from what I understand, was, you probably know more than I do, but wasn't that right of a quarterback when he first got drafted.
No, he was not. So yeah, he would have been every bit that good. He would have been special, big arm. Lamar Jackson is actually the best comparison I could come up with. But I think he would have been better. I think he would have been a better thrower from the get. And Lamar Jackson has developed into a fine thrower. So that offense is not as just tailor-made to his running ability. But I hate that we left him out last week. I think he was that special. And we talk about breakout players. Again, people knew who he was, but when he did that against Auburn, it was way, way different. Hit that like and subscribe button. We greatly appreciate that. Portions of the program brought to you by Zul Beer, XULbeer.com. Zul Beer is worldwide award-winning craft beer. It is absolutely fantastic. And also they have parking downtown, panoramic view of the city. And I tell you what, Missouri's doing something that's pretty smart for their football program. And I don't say that a lot, but they are. 2 minutes, and I'll tell you what Missouri's doing that Tennessee needs to fall right in line with, and they need to do it quick. Stay tuned.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Our family has been creating one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry in West Knoxville since 1986. Each piece is a combination of unique processes that bring your idea to life. Every day in our shop, a truly special item with a story all its own is being manufactured in our facility, bringing the history and family sentiment into a whole new generation of life. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler, a title that we value and respect. Because to me, being a jeweler and owning a jewelry store are not the same thing. I'm Rick Terry. I'm a jeweler, and we want to be your jeweler. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street right next to the Tennessee Theater.
When you want a hard cider that's easy to enjoy, one that's crafted to perfection, you need Tennessee Cider Company. Some say it's the signature cider of the South. Others say it's the cure to your craving. They all say you'll savor every sip. With a selection of ciders free to sample, all it takes is one taste. Visit tncidercompany.com for more information, as well as to shop our ciders and merchandise online. Thirsty yet? Doors open at 10 a.m.
Who's this guy?
Hello, wizard.
The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Message board moments brought to you by Bassey Lawn and Garden. Man alive, it's worth the drive. Whether you're in Knoxville, Nashville, Chattanooga, it's in Cleveland, Tennessee, and they've got buying power that will take you to another level. It's completely phenomenal. Bassey Lawn and Garden, man alive, it is worth the drive. Residential mowers, but think about those industrial mowers and the commercial mowers that will save you a ton of money. So message board thoughts. Hoghead says, do you think we would have won the 97 Florida game if Fulmer had realized that Jamal Lewis was actually on the team? He did not play. Mark Levine did, but I believe Mark Levine only had about 9 or 11 carries. You might want to look that up for me, Caleb. So I don't think they were committed to running the football. Now, Jamal could break, maybe he breaks an 80-yarder, and then you're like, oh, I'm Philip Fulmer. I'm the head coach, and I'm an offensive line guy. I'm going to be committed to running the ball. But if he had the same amount of touches as Levine, I'd probably say no. I know that's an unpopular decision. Travis saying Megatron.
More important thing from that game, too. If you remember, Dave, that 97 Florida game may have been the worst performance in history by a Tennessee football offensive line. Jamal Lewis couldn't pass protect. It would have been worse if he started that game. Peyton Manning was already under pressure the whole game. Remember that?
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, I do. Yeah, I was like on the 11th row of the student section. My buddy didn't make it though because he was the one who was supposed to sneak all the alcohol in. Sorry, I made it.
I think he gave it
there's
to the
a reason. There's a reason I put it all in his backpack.
I think he gave it to the offensive line that day because that offensive line should have been. They all should have quit for the way they were horrible with the way they protected Peyton Manning that day.
Megatron was the best wide receiver ever on the message board by Travis. Might have been. We'll never know. That's what scares me about Hendon Hooker, but I don't want to go down that path.
Randy Moss was. Sorry.
I would go Randy Moss, number 1 overall. But this sounds crazy. If I had to pick somebody that was not a quarterback, I would take Jerry Rice. And I know you think I'm crazy. All right, so he's just rolling his eyes.
Overrated.
Okay. Elias says memory gets a bit fuzzy there, but I remember folks being very surprised how much Tennessee struggled rushing in early 97. Elias also adding, wasn't Brian Darden some sort of mega recruit? Brian Darden is the ultimate go-to of a guy that not only was a mega recruit, but people saw in preseason camp and thought that he was going to be a phenom. I'm talking about guys that know ball, and that was before my time, but guys like Jimmy Himes thought that he was going to be a superstar, and he ended up being nothing. I don't know the complete backstory of why not. And then Shadow Wolf says Jamal was NFL looking when he walked through the door at Tennessee. I do think there's a lot of truth to that. And
Alabama players are NFL looking all the time, and they still win titles.
Now, I mean, Jamal's junior year, 97, 98, 99. So that would have been 99. I mean, he should have just taken the year off and gone to the NFL.
Oh, I agree. As a matter of fact, Travis Henry was significantly better that year than Jamal Lewis. I mean, I remember watching in 99 thinking that Travis Henry was the better running back, honestly, long term. And then we realized, you're right, Jamal Lewis was just trying to protect himself for the NFL. But who can blame him for that?
Yep. Okay, so here we go in an interesting development. We like to bring you the good stuff, and this is something that could affect Missouri, could affect Tennessee, and therefore affect the SEC and what is now the SEC East. And that is some changes with the NIL rules, and they're taking place in the state of Missouri. So let's get to that. Brought to you by Campbell Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Campbell Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn fixed my vision. Not far-sighted, not nearsighted. It's perfect. No contacts, no glasses. It is absolutely awesome. So Campbell Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, cataract surgery as well, which you may need. So think of that for your loved one because the doctors are local and they have the vision centers all over East Tennessee to take care of your annual checkups and such. So Tennessee's ahead of the NIL. We would all agree with that. Tennessee and the NIL seem made for each other because of Tennessee's hunger and their ability to provide those hungry boosters with opportunities to buy players, which is exactly what we're talking about. As someone told me, it's as simple as this. Player X goes from one school, that school offers X, another school offers X, another school offers X, and he takes the highest bid. So that's what we're about. The days of, man, I grew up wanting to play for this school are still there. But when you're talking about transfers, they're really not. Now, I think there are advantages of going to places that fit your style, like a Dante Thornton to Tennessee. But it's a lot about cash. Tell me what Missouri, the state of Missouri, not the University of Missouri, is doing to help Eli Drinkwitz other than providing him with free toupees.
So what Missouri is doing right now, and this is very much ahead of the curve, and I don't know if it's good or bad for the sport yet if other teams do it, but they are passing an NIL law that it addresses a lot of things with the NIL that's a little bit of a pushback against the NCAA that I don't want to go into. The legislature's already passed it. It's waiting to be signed by the governor. But the crux of this NIL law is this. high school recruits will be allowed to enter NIL deals and start earning endorsement money as soon as they sign with an in-state program. High school recruits in Missouri are effectively being bribed to stay in state at this point. Now, you could make the case that a lot of people are having a problem with this. You could make the case of, oh my gosh, how could you do that with, trying to force kids to stay in state or bribe them to stay in state? Well, guess what, Dave? How many states have lottery scholarships to try to bribe kids to stay in state with academics and go to in-state schools? I mean, this is a common thing. You want the best at whatever. You want the best kids in your state at whatever they're good at to stay within the state. So I don't blame Missouri for doing this. The question becomes, if you're a school that recruits national like Tennessee, what happens when the state of Georgia decides to do this, or the state of Louisiana decides to do this?
Okay, so let me clarify for the record. Here's what makes this law different. So you can get NIL money in high school in Tennessee. I could go out and sponsor a guy, and we could be rolling with that. In Georgia right now, it's under consideration. And there have been a couple of states. Alabama confirmed it was prohibited. Florida confirmed prohibited. So that just gives it. South Carolina confirmed prohibited. So you can't do it there. Tennessee, you can. But there's no attachment to going Tennessee like the Hope Scholarship. So, I mean, if, for instance, my son qualified for a lot of Hope Scholarship, we get nothing out of that because he's not that it strikes me that is hurtful, but maybe. And he gets none of that because he's going out of state. So they only get this NIL money if they sign with Missouri. First of all,
or some other Division II school that plays football.
Right, inside of the state. First of all, that seems very illegal to me. Okay. But you say it's already just needs to be signed off.
I mean, what can anybody do to stop it?
I guess nothing. I trust you on the legal stuff. First of all, that sounds very, very illegal, okay? Because you're determining where a kid can play ball, which is the same thing that the that college football was doing by not paying players. I mean, that was illegal. They're 18 years old. Second of all, if you're 18 years old, and I think it's stupid that people can't drink at 18, but they can go fight for our country and die, okay? But for whatever reason, we pick that age as you're an adult. Argue in society nowadays, you're really not an adult until about 22, Caleb. I don't know about you, but I wasn't. Most of my friends weren't. I mean, to think that I was an adult at 19 or 20, I was an idiot.
Quite honestly, I made idiotic decisions until my late 20s. So
yeah, I did too. So, But really, that's when I look at people different. Okay, like I take an instance where somebody gets, let's take like the Henry Ruggs incident. I mean, to me, that's almost still a kid making a stupid decision. But again, not to get sidetracked. So, we have defined it as 18. So if you're telling me that's the law, and these kids have been absolutely ripped off for years, and it's made me very angry for 2 decades. That they get so little of the pie. And the 98 team that we're doing the Celebrate 98 had to cobble together money to be able to, because they didn't have a cafeteria open on a Sunday. So they had to cobble together money to put together a cookout. And some guys had no money, zero. And they couldn't throw any money in. Some people had 20, some people had 5. I'm talking about to go buy a bunch of ribs and pork and stuff. So that's always made me mad. But if you're 17, tough bleep. Okay? I'm sorry. My son could not work after 9 o'clock. He's one of the best employees where he works. Could not work after 9 o'clock on a school day. That's a law. Okay? And it may have been 8 o'clock. You're under 18. And to put a 17-year-old in some shape, form, or fashion, if he signs with the Missouri school, and listen, some of this is going to happen at other schools where kids get a little bit of money at 16. It's going to derail their lives if it's a significant amount of money. If somebody gives me $2,000-$3,000 for whatever, I still remember I owned a landscaping company out of college. I got my first $2,200, and again, I was in that 20s age, 22, I think. First thing, we went to Atlanta and spent like 500 of it. How stupid was that? Party time, me and the missus. And this, to me, it puts the kids in a very dangerous position because they got big time cash in their pocket. We talked about gambling last week. It also is a disservice, much like college football playing football on Friday night, which that decision was made 10, 15 years ago and still makes me mad. It also hurts them because how's little Bobby, who's 5'9" and bust his rear all the time, and he's 155 pounds, and those guys exist even at Georgia high schools. How's he look at John Jones, who's 6'8" and a 330-pound offensive lineman, and the local grain and feed shop down the road who has money to spend wants to give him $10,000 for being a spokesman and put him up on a billboard. You're just not emotionally mature for any of this. And I got in a discussion with this about Georgia, and they're fighting it so hard, and it looks like they've won. The Georgia Coaches Association is really strong, so that's why it's prohibited there right now, but it could change, as Caleb mentioned. This is not the right thing for the kids. I mean, NIL in college was the right thing for the kids. This is wrong for the kids, Caleb.
So your position is you don't think high school kids at all should be allowed to get NIL money at all?
Well, I can't argue if you're 18. Okay, so let's say you turned 18 before your senior year. I mean, I can't argue that. You technically, to me, are a man. You should also be able to, in my opinion, buy alcohol. I've always thought that. So 18 is your man. Or let's decide, whatever the dad blame number is, if it's 18, 21, 22, it should be consistent across the board. You can fight for your country. You can vote. You can buy alcohol. You can buy cigarettes. Whatever the number is, as a society, let's decide. Okay? But right now, what we're going to do, this is football's grand idea, is they're just going to throw a bunch of cash at some high school kids that have proven a thimble's worth of stuff. And that, to me, is going to derail more kids than it will help them. There's some inner city kids or rural kids that they don't have money. Yes, and they could use it. But are those kids, the numbers of those kids, compared to the number of kids that are going to get cash and it's going to derail their career, is not even going to be comparable. This will ruin thousands of players playing future.
Okay, so you're critical of Tennessee allowing high school athletes to get money too, then, right?
Again, if it's 18,
under 18, you're critical of Tennessee's law too, then, right? Because I think they allow under 18-year-olds to get money now too.
They do. So
the question becomes, okay, because we're talking about a broad sense of NIL. What you're talking about is something that's going to have to be regulated federally. I mean, there's just no way. I mean, one, we're seeing.
The whole thing needs to be regulated federally.
Here's the problem with this. How are we going to tell high school athletes under 18 they can't make money off this when you got states like Arkansas that just passed a law to bring back child labor? So, I mean, how are you going to sit there and say you can have child labor, but high school kids can't make money off, what they're contributing? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you're right. I'm with you. Have a consistent standard across the board, but we literally have two states now and then there was just recently, I think, a factory that got exposed for overworking 11-year-olds. I forget what state it was in. But we're bringing back child labor in this country. So
remember this too. Okay. I went to a school that kind of mounted up every 7-8 years. They'd have a good run of talent. That was your chance to win a championship in high school. You weren't going to win one other years. What happens when all those guys are bought out by the big school in town in the more financially prolific area, such as, well, I don't mind. I mean, some of you are from Knoxville. I went to Powell High School. I got my PhD, Powell High diploma, after 3 years of PMS, which was Powell Middle School. But Farragut, I mean, if they wanted to, they could say, "Hey, you're pretty good. Here's your NIL deal. Come to Farragut." And then those other schools are never any good.
See, that there's already a problem with that, though, with the private schools. I can tell you this in Memphis right now.
I'm okay if they're private, though, not to interrupt.
But this is the thing. But I mean, it's already private, so it's like public schools are all already effectively being privatized. I mean, you got more taxpayer money going to private schools than public schools in some states now. So I'm like, I get your point. And if we had a uniform standard of education where just everybody had the same amount of money spent at every school, no matter what, then yeah, we could have this conversation. But that's not what we have. And I don't know how this is going to end up long term, but if a private school is going to do it, I mean, at this point, the school still can't do it. Just the town can do it. Or not the town, just the businesses in the town can do it. There's a lot to figure out here. But I will say this, if you're going to have NIL deals for if you're going to have NIL for high school athletes, which you and I can debate on, and I think I'm on your side on this, but I'm on your side, but I wish we would get rid of child labor altogether. Then it's crazy that we're bringing it back in some states. But
what do you define as child labor? Because I was proud of my son for getting a job at 16. But it had to be part. He could only work like 20, 25 hours, and it couldn't be after 9 o'clock on a school night.
Okay, so basically in Arkansas, they just signed a law that people under 16 can get hired for work without the Division of Labor's permission, which is it's kind of a permit you have to get to hire. You have to have like a special permit, I think, a lot of times to hire under 16-year-olds.
That you can put a kid to work at the Walmart factory in Arkansas? Is that what we're saying?
Yes. You can straight put a kid to work at the Walmart factory in Arkansas. They just signed that law this year. But if we're going to sit there and say an 11-year-old can be put to work at Walmart in a factory, why can't a 16-year-old make money off playing football?
Well, yeah, if we're gonna say the whole thing's screwy, we can turn it into China and they start making Nikes.
I mean, that's what they're doing. I mean, Arkansas literally, they'll cut social assistance for kids and say, hey, rather than have lunch, why not just send you to a factory and you can work there when you're 11, even if you have school and you have things like that. I mean, it's
disgusting. It's disgusting. Hit the like and subscribe button. I think Sean Ellis is going to be up next on the Celebrate 98 series. We'll have Cooper Mays this week as well. Thanks. We had a surge in subscribers, so really appreciate that. But be sure and set your notifications on too, because these things are going to drop the Celebrate 98 series and Cooper and Jacob with our Vol Report, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning and Bassey Lawn and Garden at different times. So get those notifications on as well. I'll leave you with this. Travis says NIL exists of video games. Yes, it does. Because it essentially came down to guys were getting a piece of the pie for NCAA football, and the basketball game is Ed O'Bannon,
a hero. Ed O'Bannon is ahead of his time hero. He is the prince of athletics. If you guys know about Prince, yes. Label.
So, and then Travis went on to say no one is buying high school video games or buying jerseys. That's true, but you got a lot of high school boosters that cobble together money to pay coaches outside of their regular pay. And I'm talking about public schools, not private schools. Outside of the regular pay, there's some high school coaches that are making over $100,000 a year at some public schools because they find ways to feed them money because they want to keep the coaches. They're going to do that the same way with the players, and it's going to make it you're either an it school or you're not, and that ain't cool, man. I've been wanting players to get money for 20 years. That's way too far. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Presentation of Off the Hook Sports. It is weekdays at 10 a.m. We'll talk to you next time. Have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, whatever the